I'm going to jump right into the scriptures today, and I have to admit the story of Sarah laughing and having that back and forth with God is pretty funny. But today I want to focus on this New Testament story that we get to explore because it's this one moment in the lives of two women. It's a short story, and yet it is so impactful and so multi-layered. I think this story speaks to our stressed out, over-committed, frazzled experience of life. And I think it's also something of a mic drop statement challenging gender expectations. So we begin with Martha, who is hosting this gathering in her home as Jesus drops by with this crowd of followers. And she's counting the heads as everybody's coming in, and she's scouring the pantry for something to come up with. You know, they didn't have cell phones, they didn't call ahead. She's trying to feed this whole group and hopefully impress this important, honorable visitor. I think Martha must be the oldest child in the family. She has that oldest child hyper-responsibility syndrome. And then her sister Mary just joins the group and listens to the rabbi Jesus. We're told that Martha is distracted by her many tasks, but maybe it's not the work that it's the problem, but how worked up she's getting about it. She bursts in and she confronts the guest that she wanted to impress, and she asks him, "Don't you care that my sister has left me with all the work to do by myself? Tell her to help me." She's kind of a wreck. She's trying to respond to this enormous situation. Maybe she's lost her sense of perspective, and I think that's one of the things we can all relate to. Sometimes there's just too many details and too many expectations that we want to fulfill. And sometimes, like Martha, we want to explode at someone, whoever put us in this untenable situation, even if it is God. Martha seems to think that Jesus will certainly see the situation that she does, so she corners him and assumes he's going to agree that Mary is shirking her duties. "Don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself?" You should have noticed her need. You should have sent Mary to the kitchen earlier. And we might be tempted to agree with Martha that Mary fits that negative description of the irresponsible younger sister. She just sits down with the visitors. Or maybe she has sensed the presence of God and forgotten her manners. Maybe she's forgotten her proper place in the house and the family. But here, right here, is where this deeper lesson of gender equality, this lesson of subverting the patriarchal expectations takes place. Mary's actions have definitely transgressed their cultural lines. Women were not supposed to cross these lines, and maybe even more than we have noticed so far. C.S. Keener explains that people normally sat on chairs, or at banquets they might recline on couches, but only disciples sat at the feet of their teachers. Serious disciples were preparing to be teachers, which was not a role permitted to women. And we're told that Mary sat at the Lord's feet. This phrase used for disciples, for students who have been accepted into the rabbi's training program. This was a radically countercultural message that a woman could sit at the feet of the master and learn from him just like any other male disciple. And I really think this is the reason that this story is here in our scriptures, why it's been preserved for all time. I'm sure there were a lot of stories that didn't make it into the Bible that we have, things Jesus said, encounters with people that we'll never get to know. But the stories that were held on to and told over and over again that made it into that canon were important. For some reason, they were important to the early church. And the thing is, most of them show Jesus as a cultural change agent. And we might notice that this story comes right after the story of the Good Samaritan. As Colin noted last week, this is a story of the Good Samaritan that makes the enemy into the good guy. The foreigner is the true neighbor. To follow Jesus, you will have to change your cultural understanding of what are appropriate relationships. Your national leaders, religious leaders, might be telling you that someone is your enemy, and Jesus says they are your neighbor. Someone loved by God, someone you are to love as you love yourself. Today's story establishes the fact that women were disciples. Martha, overwhelmed, just trying to fit into her cultural expectations, and that Mary, as a woman, should have been doing the same. She should have been in the kitchen assisting with the preparations for the food. And Mary, choosing to sit with the disciples and listen to this message, was breaking tradition. And then Jesus approves of this seismic cultural shift. He says Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken from her. Now, I think just because this is a story about women and changing cultural expectations for women doesn't mean it's not a story for everyone. I think this story is one that is placed in Scripture that opens the possibility of moving beyond even our binary gender constructs. The things that we have been taught that are absolute, or maybe not so absolute. Because whatever your gender, in this story, you are encouraged to reconsider the cultural expectations that have been placed on you. And we recognize our perceived gender at birth dictates so much of our lives. It dictates how we are conditioned with the behaviors that are acceptable, the gender roles that we are expected to fit into. Our parents, our teachers, sometimes unknowingly, teach us these molds, that boys don't cry and that girls need to be ladylike. Our culture teaches us to accept that, well, men are better at some things than actually most things. Women have their place, and, women are tender and nurturing, and men don't have to be that. Men have to be more rational, none of which we really see well in reality. But this notion that human beings fall unequivocally into two genders is simply not true. It's even denying scientific fact and an understanding that existed even in biblical times. I don't know, I learned something that's new to me recently, might be new to you, you might already know it. But the Talmud, the authoritative compendium of Jewish legal traditions, contains no less than 7 gender designations. And I'm going to try to pronounce them, and my Hebrew is not that good. But the Jewish theologian Rachel Schneiderman describes them as Zakar is for male, and Nekeba is for female. Androgynous is one having both male and female characteristics. And Tumtum is lacking distinct sexual characteristics. An Alonit is one who is identified female at birth without developing the secondary female characteristics at puberty. Saras Hama is one who is identified as male at birth without developing secondary male sexual characteristics at puberty. And Saras Adam identifies a male at birth but doesn't develop those sexual characteristics due to castration early in life. I didn't know those were all in there. And now we know a lot more from the aspect of science than we knew before. Rebecca Helm is a biologist and professor at the University of North Carolina, sharing just a little bit of helpful information on this subject. She writes, if you are asked, you will probably say that biological sex is caused by X chromosome if you're female and XY if you're male. But it turns out there's this one gene on the Y chromosome called the SRY. And during our human embryonic development, the SRY protein turns on all the male-associated genes. So having this SRY gene makes you genetically male. But sometimes that SRY gene pops off of the Y chromosome and over to an X chromosome, and so a Y with no SRY means you're female, but chromosomally you're male, and genetically you're female. And an X with an SRY means that you are physically male, chromosomally female, and genetically male. And And then there are more sex-related genes that ultimately turn on the hormones in the different areas of the body. So a hormonal male means you produce the normal level of male-associated hormones, except some percentage of females will have higher levels of male hormones than some males, and vice versa. And then as you are developing, your body may not produce enough hormones for your genetic sex, leading you to be genetically male or female, but then chromosomally male or female, or hormonally non-binary or physically non-binary. And then add to that that you have cells that have receptors that hear the signals from those sex hormones, and sometimes those receptors don't work, which means you may be genetically male or female, or chromosomally male or female, or hormonally male or female, or non-binary, with cells that may or may not hear that call, leading to a body that could be then male, non-binary, or female. Okay, so basically her conclusion is it's pretty obviously that biological sex is very complicated. She suggests that before you discriminate against someone on the basis of their biological sex and their identity, maybe you should ask yourself if you have seen your chromosomes. Amen. Have you seen the genes of the people you love, the hormones of the people you work with, the state of their cells? The cultural expectations that are placed upon us are not absolute. And Jesus pushes against them over and over again. Jesus may not have had the science written out in front of him, knew human life, and he knew that each person is an individual, complicated and beautiful and wonderful. So biology is complicated, but kindness and respect don't have to be. Now, we will continue to explore some of these issues of gender identity as we're going into the fall, as we are approaching Pride Week again. But this story of Mary and Martha and Jesus just has felt to me like a crack in the armor of the patriarchal gender expectations that try to control how we live. So I want to conclude this one with that other message that's found in this story, because this story also speaks deeply to our human experience of worrying. Jesus was, in this moment, also affirming the decision to stop worrying about what is proper, stop worrying about what other people think, long enough just to be in the presence of God and just take in that experience. He isn't criticizing Martha. He's showing compassion for her. He's repeating her name twice, Martha, Martha. Speaking slowly and calmly, he acknowledges her stress and her frustration. I get it. You're worried and distracted by many things. But this distraction takes us away from what is important, and it gets us fixed on the little things that don't really matter. We can affirm Martha as a person who knows how to get things done efficiently and on time, but she's trying so hard to make an impression that she misses the moment. And she needs what Mary has chosen, what Martha assumes is not there for her. Mary sits at Jesus' feet and listens for this beautiful vision of what life is meant to be. So for us, it is also true the world with its expectations distract us and frustrate us and exhaust us. But we too are invited to take time to be in the presence of God, to renew our spirits and our sense of purpose and vision so that we then can take care of one another. We can show hospitality to the stranger. We can keep loving in the midst of all that is happening, living out this vision that Christ has given us. This is what we will continue to do as community and in our lives together. But now, together, let's sing.